Once again, it is my privilege and pleasure to come and spend these few moments of your time. Everything begins in cycles. The beginning, the creation, the extended period of evolution, the extended period, shall we say, of education, and the final integration. Enough for us to begin a conversation.
Thank you, Mercredan. Do you want to elaborate a bit more on what you just introduced to us?
Every creation begins with definition. One makes a choice and one begins the process. That is, shall we say, the active phase, the dynamic phase that is, in your terms, the masculine focus. That is the, shall we call it, a definite creation. Then one settles in to the feminine approach that is the reflection and the recruitment of the experience. One begins to settle down and to receive. The feminine principle is reception. So one receives what is the lessons brought about through the active beginning. And as one integrates all of that, one arrives at some conclusions. The integration of that period of learning that begins the next cycle of creation. Does that make some sense?
Yes, it does.
So shall we say then, one of the most important factors is the ability to receive what is being delivered. And if one accepts that, if one is able to settle in to the creation, then its integration is complete. But if one is in resistance, reaction to that, and does not wish to experience, then the period of time is extended until that is completed. In other words, one cannot integrate that which one refuses to experience.
Okay, that's clearer now. Thank you. So with the condition of comparing ourselves, where does that tend to begin, or is it different for everybody?
You come into the world, shall we say, as an identification. And so it is natural to find one's place in the world. You come in and certain qualities are delivered. It is, shall we say, better to be beautiful, than ugly. It is better to be active than passive. It is better to be a boy or not a girl. It is better to be this or that. It is better to have the blue eyes rather than the brown. Or one is better to be white-skinned than brown, and so on. Then you go into your activities and notice there is this one that is the right color. There is this one that has the right attractiveness, the right length of hair, and so on and so on. So it is natural to begin to look at your gifts and to resist that which is not perfect. You understand? And every parent wants the perfect child. And so then every failure becomes something to be hidden and resisted, and by that method extended in time. Does this make sense? So one can resist what one has considered, that is how one has made the comparison to others for a lifetime. And every activity is threatened by such comparisons. So, shall we say, one has the idea one is not, does not have the perfect temperament. One takes that into your interviews for your jobs, and it becomes obvious to everyone else that you are not to be trusted because you are not the perfect person. You understand? Your field of influence is dictated by the ideas one is creating in reality. That is one's personal reality that extends into the fields of influence. Do you follow what I'm saying? None of it, of course, is as it seems to be. One creates in line with such ideas. If one refuses to experience the idea in its totality, it will continue to exist. Do you understand? If one experiences it and integrates what that experience brings to bear, one might change it and it dissolves away. I hope I have not covered the topic so quickly.
No, that's okay. That's good. Could you give us an example to be more specific?
As always, it is difficult to give examples without treading on many toes, because people are very sensitive to these complaints. So when one has a comparison, it becomes a challenge, shall we say. For example, one has the wrong colored skin. Now, one refuses to experience that, not that you have the color, but that you are comparing it. You are having a negative experience of it, rather than experiencing the negative ideas and recognizing through one's contemplation that it is madness. It is nothing that is really true or evident. Do you understand? As such, when one integrates that, one becomes a fully functioning human being without traces of that negativity. Do you follow? One's field of influence automatically changes, and one begins to be exposed, shall we say, to a different realm of experience. Life, in fact, changes. The color of the skin, of course, does not, because there was never anything wrong with it at all. It is simply part of the natural creation. One came into experience and to fulfill, shall we say, a fuller experience of it. In other words, many people with other lifetime reference take on to balance the accounts as such.
Okay. So with that said, then if we do realize that we're in that dialogue of comparison, what are some of the best ways that we can interrupt it? Having the awareness is one, but if it keeps returning to us as a pattern, what can we do?
So we say the pattern keeps returning because it is keeping being recreated. One thinks that one is under, shall we say, the challenge of patterns. In other words, one creates the idea one can never escape one's patterns. And now there is a truth that is bound to occur. One is constantly fighting the pattern one wishes to escape. But one is truly resisting the experience of having patterns. Do you follow what I mean? One is resisting the lesson that comes from that experience. And as one finds that experience, one is delivered, shall we say, into freedom of expression. Now, integration occurs. Do you follow what I mean? That there is the experience of being free of the need to recreate the ongoing experience. Do you understand? The fields of influence then no longer hold with, there are patterns that one cannot escape. One cannot escape one's upbringing. One cannot escape, shall we say, traumatic events and so on it goes. And yet, in reality, you are in the present moment of time. This is where you are. Do you follow what I mean? This is, shall we say, your point of power. Everything can be changed in the present, and nothing can be changed in the past. Do you follow what I mean? Almost then, as the past is a catapult into the future. If one continues to energize the past in your present time, the future is determined. You follow what I mean?
Yes. So, for instance, the field of influence is about how the environment around our beliefs shape up and meet us to
Of course.
the pattern.
As I pointed out, you are the author of your storyline. If you continue to write in the same vein, you will continue to have the same outcomes within the story. And so there are a whole genre of stories known as horror stories. There are stories where the horror turns out to be fake. In other words, a misunderstanding that turns the horror into romance rather than into crime. Do you follow what I'm getting at? One has, first of all, to take responsibility as the author. If one is not responsible for one's creations, one is then at, shall we say, the under the auspice of whoever you have given the power towards. If it is a parent, then it is one is under their control, their power. If it is a God, then under that one's control and power. If it is an organization, and so forth and onwards. One can take one's power back into one's life and create what one desires. It influences the fields that one is surrounded with, or one is surrounding oneself with, and affects everything and everyone.
Interesting.
Then it is, shall we say, that one can assert one's power within the fields over those that are less powerful, to whose advantage is it, and how that affects the overall fields of influence within, shall we say, the human consciousness.
Interesting. So, are we predisposed to our lessons this lifetime, if you like, from our previous embodiments?
The resonance is in itself a field of influence. That is, the previous life experiences radiate out, leaving behind, shall we call them, remnants in the fields of history. So it embodies itself in locations, it embodies itself in the national themes and so on. And so when one arrives in embodiment within a field of influence, a chosen field, one is already attuned to that heritage. Do you follow what I mean? In other words, life in the cosmos is truly the interaction of fields of influence. We might even call them, to some degree, magnetic fields of influence. And so it is a relationship between the polarities. You follow what I mean? And that relationship brings into being the nature of comparison. Do you follow? So it is a deeper seed within the field when one chooses to occupy. I put it this way because it does not determine who you are, but it is a field in which one can create and affect both the personal field of creation and the greater field of heritage. Do you follow what I mean? Shall we say one might have carried what in scientific terms is a genetic predisposition from generation after generation, and at a certain moment of understanding that genetic possibility drops out of the genetic line. That is, one ceases to create the possibilities for self and for future generations. I want to say that in this case, it is difficult to come to terms, not so much to understand this, but to come to terms with it, because the, shall we say, the amount of energy that is built into the general field that is resilient and is carried into other fields. In other words, the collective understanding, the collective knowledge affects those fields in which it is, in which it contains, until there is, shall we call it, a breakthrough. In the present evolving epoch, that is the new epoch, there are many, shall we call them, breakthroughs, scientific breakthroughs that are challenging the historical past. And as a result, the new epoch changes its direction. This is truly a period of extraordinary evolution.
Interesting. So with this new epoch, when you say it changes direction, what determines that? Is that the collective soul that changes that through the awareness and waking up to the...
Of course,
yeah.
Because the collective field of influence is being dramatically challenged, and many things come to light. How that has determined life periods in, shall we call it, historic times, because in the recent past, shall we say, in the archaeological past, certain things are self-evident. Do you follow what I mean? But when, shall we say, a new archaeological find destroys such ideas, there is, shall we say, a shake-up in the whole concept of history. History is changing even in the present time. Do you follow what I mean? The old certainties have become less certain, and in many ways even unlikely. That is just one example as human begin, shall we say, to explore the greater cosmos. So you have moved from exploring the physical planet as such, exploring the solar field of awareness, and to even begin to go beyond, recognizing that you can only see what is within the field that one can influence.
Thank you. Thank you. That's enough for today.
Once again, we are touching on concepts that are deep within the unconscious realms of consciousness. That is the what is unknown becomes more available. Then once again, thank you for your time, your attention and your energy. And I leave here.